Since President Trump's return to the White House last year, no question that we have been seeing across the board a growing abandonment of woke DEI policies. That's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this exodus, if you will, from the corporate world is certainly a notable thing. We have many of them that have been dropping out of the Human Rights Campaign's Corporate Equality Index. Many of them have been cutting ties with the discredited Southern Poverty Law Center. But are these corporations really committed to staying out of the cultural wars, or are they simply moving with the cultural winds of the day? Well, joining us now to discuss this is Jerry Bowyer. He's the CEO of Bowyer Research, which is engaged with publicly traded companies, consulting on proxy votes at over 2,000 annual meetings and on roughly 20,000 proposals per year. Jerry, welcome back to Washington Watch. Honor to have you.
Thank you, Jody. Great to be with you again.
All right, so let's start with one of the most recent corporations to drop their affiliation with the Human Rights Campaign. That is the Truist Bank. Tell us what's happening there.
Yeah, as one of many, as a matter of fact, we've been dealing with a lot of companies. I don't know if you saw, there was an article a couple of weeks ago where 2/3 of Fortune 500 companies are no longer participating with the Human Rights Campaign. We've seen that from a lot of the regional banks. We've seen that even from tech companies and consumer companies. So this is really astonishing because the Human Rights Campaign, this is the major LGBTQ++ advocacy activist group, was an astonishing success. I mean, the way that it was able to get, hundreds and hundreds, it became almost something that every Fortune 500 and every Fortune 1000 company signed up for. They would fill out an annual survey in order to get a 100% on this survey, this Corporate Equality Index, because they said, well, we won't discriminate against gay people. That's where it starts. But little by little, they moved the goalpost until finally it was bathroom wars, Bud Light, branding, and puberty blockers for the children of employees. And that's how powerful it had become. And yet we're seeing that reverse across the board, where 2/3 of the Fortune 500 companies, really 2/3 of the Fortune 1000 companies, have dropped out. And we see it one at a time as we talk to these companies. And we say, we understand that HRC, that this score of 100 seemed to you like it was an A+, but for half of America, it's an F-. Why don't you just stop participating altogether? You don't have to have these outside groups who are determining your policies, who are pressuring you. Just focus on being a bank, Truist or Bank of America or M&T or fill in the blank, any of them, JP Morgan Chase, etc. Focus on being a bank. Focus on being a tech company. Focus on being an Amex. Focus on being a credit card company. And a lot of them are saying, okay, that's what we're going to do. Because frankly, I'm not sure they all realized what they were signing up for. I think that they just thought this was going to be easy and we're going to say, we're not going to discriminate against gay employees. Great, no one should. And then they find themselves pulled into the bathroom wars and the Bud Light stuff and all this really extreme. And it was sold to them as a way to decrease controversy. And what it became was a huge magnet for controversy. Once they saw that, they're getting out of it.
Very interesting. So is that basically your message to shareholders? I mean, that's pretty straightforward in its approach. Is that basically what you're saying to these shareholders and thereby producing a change?
No, well, yes, it's what we're saying, but we're not saying it to shareholders because shareholders already know it. We're saying it on behalf of shareholders to the companies. So right. We're the people who work for the shareholders. Our clients are shareholders, and they say, I own shares in this company, and I don't know what's gone wrong with Disney or Target or InBev, that's Bud Light. We think they're doing things that are risky. We think that Visa should not be processing payments for deepfake child porn. And we think that MasterCard should not be processing payments for deepfake child porn. Hey, Jerry, go talk to them on our behalf. And we do a proposal, we use the proposal system, and we talk to them. So we're representing the interest of shareholders against companies who've been led around by the nose by activist groups. And that's the message.
That's
the message
fantastic.
Is get back to neutral.
That's fantastic. So tell me, what is how different would you describe the interactions that you're having now compared to the interactions, say, a couple of years ago that you were having with these corporations?
So let's go back maybe 5 years ago when we started. We got a lot of eye rolling, scoffing, open laughter, interruptions, essentially rude treatment. They didn't know how to talk to us, or sometimes they would treat us like left-wing activists. I remember the first company I engaged with, a glass company from upstate New York, and I said, what about viewpoint diversity? Different like political views and religious views. And the investor relations person said, oh, we've got diversity. We got all the kinds of diversity. I said, what kind do you have? She said, we have all the letters, L, G, B, and then she kind of stops. I'm hitting all the letters. I don't want to miss any. I don't want to get fired. And I said, what about C? And she said, what's C? I said, Christian. You don't have any Christian employee resource groups. You have a Pride employee resource group. You don't have Christians. So these companies discriminate against churches in their employee match. And so 5 years ago, we were treated like I don't know, like moral troglodytes. Like, who are these awful people who don't believe in the human rights campaign? Now there's a vibe shift. By the way, it started before the election of Trump. I don't think Trump causes it. I think Trump and this vibe shift are basically the same root. The American people are pushing back. Now it's very different. Now, Starbucks is still going to be Starbucks. Disney's going to be Amazon. I mean, they didn't really want to talk, and they didn't change anything. But that's maybe 3 or 4 out of 100 companies we've engaged with, most of which have been extremely productive engagements. There's a thing going on right now that nobody knows about, which is the biggest reverse march through the institutions I've ever seen in my life, as the ESG and DEI bubble is just collapsing before our eyes.
So that's just fascinating to me, and the impact that you're able to have. Tell me about, I know you've had some resistance on charitable matching criteria and that type of thing. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, a lot of companies have a charitable match program. They tell their employees, we want you to be charitable. We want you to give to 501c3 charities. And that's great. We think that's a wonderful thing. That's social capital. But a number of them had Southern Poverty Law Center hate group screens on that. So someone tries to give to Turning Point or Family Research Council or Focus on the Family or Alliance Defending Freedom, Turning Point, etc., and they find out that they're banned from giving to that. Or in many cases, they're banned from simply giving to a church or synagogue. You can give to Freedom from Religion Foundation or Human Rights Campaign or the ACLU, but you can't give to Family Research Council because that was on the hate group list. What we're finding is most of the companies didn't even know that hate group list was functioning in their charitable match program. There's an outside company named Benevity that runs most of the charitable match programs for the companies. Companies don't run this themselves. They use this outside vendor, and they have this hate group list thing, which isn't targeting hate groups. No one's trying to give to the KKK. It's targeting mainstream conservative institutions. But the amazing thing is when we point that out to companies, almost all of them, sorry, Starbucks, you didn't do the right thing. But everybody else said, oh, we don't want that. And our message to them is, as long as you're deciding which charities are worthy and which ones aren't, no one's ever going to be happy. You're in a punishment seat. But if you just say, if the IRS says this is a charity, we're going to match to it, now all of a sudden, who's going to argue with that? Then you're neutral. You're going to get a lot less pushback from the left and the right.
Wow. Interesting. So you've got out there, obviously, a lot of Christian organizations that, and I want to get your take on this. They're worried that any progress that has taken place in recent years or that's currently taking place could potentially disappear under a future Democratic administration. Are those legitimate concerns, you think?
No, I don't think they are, because the shift started before the election of Trump. I think if they want to have, I'm going to be a little tough love here for Christian ministries, conservative organizations. The problem wasn't the Biden administration. The problem is you weren't showing up. How many church and denominational pension funds are paying any attention to how they're voting on these proxy statements? Almost none of them. How many ministries that have these foundations are paying any attention? Almost none of them. Red states are not paying any attention. Our absence is the main problem. If we're showing up, we're more important than the Biden administration or whatever is coming next. Kamala, I would not prefer it. If we're showing up and engaging, Bowyer Research is showing up and engaging on behalf of a few ministries, and with 2% vote counts, we're still moving people. But the vast majority of conservative organizations, ministries, churches, Christian voters have no idea how they're voting on these. The financial advisors have no idea. We're not showing up. We complain about a process of woke capitalism that we helped create with our absence and neglect.
Yeah, amazing what can happen when we show up to the game.
That's it.
Do you have any insight as to how some of these groups, HRC or SPLC or who knows what other groups, how are they responding to the exodus of corporations, specifically corporations that literally once used to bow down to them?
They're responding a couple of ways. Number one, layoffs. Because their revenues are getting cut off because these companies, the company basically, it's a protection racket, let's be clear. You give to HRC and that counts on whether you're getting a 100 score. But if the company doesn't care whether they're getting a 100 score, then who cares about buying them off? So that's a big part of it. I think the other thing is, one of the things that we've seen was really amazing from Human Rights Campaign is companies would stop participating and HRC would not update their website. Almost as if, I can't know what's going on in their minds, but it seemed almost like they wanted to hide the exodus. They wanted to give the impression that we're still really important. So what happened as Fortune 500 companies were leaving, they weren't all necessarily updating the website. They've made it very difficult to search the website to find out who's going away. And then they've added a lot of small left-wing municipalities and really small and law firms that aren't public. So they're losing Fortune 500 companies, but they're gaining some left-wing municipality as a member of HRC. So they're trying to hide the exodus, but it's undeniable now.
So you have, obviously, and you've described it so effectively, a number of these corporations and so forth have certainly slowed down and reverse course. You've got some of these organizations that have been pressing for all of this. Some of them have slowed down. But then you have organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center. They seem to have gone the opposite direction and literally stepping up their pressure on Christian organizations. Just how significant are they? How much are they themselves driving this woke culture?
They were doing it before, but I think the magic spell is broken when it comes to the Southern Poverty Law Center. And it was broken the moment that Charlie Kirk was murdered. When that happened, that was now 3 acts of political violence, 2 of which were unsuccessful. Well, it depends. The attack on Family Research Council, where the man survived, the attack on Steve Scalise, the congressman, where he survived, but Charlie Kirk didn't survive. And all of a sudden, the Southern Poverty Law Center hate list started to look like a hit list. And companies, even if they're woke, they don't want anything to do with that kind of thing. They don't want to have anything to do with political violence. So I think that's really when the spell of Southern Poverty Law Center was broken.
So where do you see all this going? What you're sharing is fascinating news. It seems deep down a very positive trend in a right direction. Is that what you see?
Yes, but to quote Churchill, it's not the end, it's not the beginning of the end, but it just might be the end of the beginning. A lot of companies are still in HRC. Most of these companies still have DEI departments, which is basically a paid activist phalanx inside the company. They still have sustainability committees, which are essentially, again, have a certain left-wing tilt to them. So we kick it out, and then it comes out and finds 7 worse than itself and brings back and finds the house cleaned. Christians need to get in the game. I'm begging you. A few ministries are doing it, but every church, every ministry, you all own shares, you all have a 401k plan or a 403b plan. You are voting. You're probably voting for what you hate. Start voting for what you love. We can help you.
I think that is fantastic. You say you can help. Tell people how they can get in touch with you.
I'm really easy. I'm all over social media. Bowyer is Bowyer, Jerry Lee Bowyer on X, or just Jerry Bowyer, Bowyer on LinkedIn and Facebook. I especially like to talk to financial advisors because they're the advisors for everybody. Christian financial advisors are, for the most part, not paying attention to this. Your clients want you to pay attention to it, and eventually they're going to find out whether you were or not.
Jerry Bowyer, CEO of Bowyer Research, thank you so much for joining us today on Washington Watch.
My pleasure, Jody.